Rich Connor. I'm the publisher of the Fort Worth Business Press. It's my pleasure today to welcome you to this webinar on the current economic stimulus package. While we wait for people in Washington to debate and decide on yet a third one that may be coming down the line, we'll offer a webinar on that next. I want to thank our title sponsor, Kelly Hart and Hallman, attorneys in Fort Worth and other cities in the country. Without a sponsor, it's very difficult for us to do these and the other events that we do. I want to urge you to, we are a small business, and in business, please feel free to go to our website at fortworthbusinesspress.com. Subscribe to our newsletters. We have 2 a day that are really a comprehensive look at news in and around in Fort Worth. We've been a trusted source of business news and local news for almost 40 years now. So we urge you to take advantage of our online and our print products, and we'd really like it if you subscribed as well. We've got a great group of panelists today. You didn't sign up to hear me talk. I'm going to turn it over to our editor, Bob Francis. He will introduce you to the panelists, and we're going to have a great discussion, and you're going to learn a lot about the current economic stimulus package. Thank you for attending.
Thanks, Rich. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Like I said, we do have a great panel, and I'll let you know who's here and then let them introduce themselves. We have Ahmad Ghauri from the Small Business Administration, Sean Bryan from Kelly Hart and Hallman, and Ian McLean from Highland Landscaping and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Small Business Council. I'll start with Ian. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we can talk a little bit about the small business and how you're involved with it.
Hello, my name is Ian McLean. So glad to be here with you all today. As Bob said, I founded Highland Landscaping. We're in our 19th year of business in South Lake. We're a landscape construction company. And I currently sit as the chairman of the Small Business Council for the United States Chamber.
All right, Ahmad, you want to tell us about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Bob, and thank you, Rich, for having me. I definitely appreciate this opportunity. My name is Ahmad Ghauri. I'm the lead economic development specialist and public information officer for the U.S. Small Business Administration's Dallas-Fort Worth district office. Our district office is one of 68 offices across the country. We cover 72 counties in my district office, so we go all the way to the Louisiana border, all the way up west to the Wichita Falls area, all the way down south to the Killeen-Waco area, and of course, all of the Metroplex. So we are your local SBA office right here in the DFW area.
All right, thanks. And Sean, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and what you do?
Thank you, Bob. I'm also glad to be here. I'm a partner in the tax section at Kelly Hart and Hallman. As Rich said, we're a 150-plus lawyer firm with our biggest office in Fort Worth, offices in Midland, Austin, New Orleans, and Baton Rouge. I started looking at this because of some of the tax provisions of some pre-CARES Act legislation in mid-March. And then when the CARES Act came along, just kind of slid into looking at and advising on the various assistance programs. And as the Treasury Department, Small Business Administration, and IRS have put out a whole lot of guidance and publications over the past 12 months, I've written about 24 blog posts on our website to kind of provide some high-level summaries of the more technical nature of those things that have come out.
It sounds like you basically found yourself a new job to do there.
I have found a new niche, yes.
Great. Ian, we've been in this about a year now. It's hard to believe. Ian, since you're on the Small Business Council of the Chamber and you're a small business yourself, why don't you tell us a little bit about the state of small business as you see it about a year into the pandemic?
Okay, that sounds good. And Bob, I probably want to start by just saying a quick blurb about what the U.S. Chamber does and the Small Business Council does. The U.S. Chamber is the largest advocacy group for business interests in the United States. And the Small Business Council, we are a council of about 100 business owners from around the United States. And we're really the tip of the spear representing small business matters in the United States. So we work with Congress, we work with the executive branch, and represent and are the voice of our 3 million small business members and really all small businesses in the United States. We have members of the council, as I said, from different parts of the country, and a host of different industries and business sizes within the small business window. So that's what we do as an organization and as a council. The state of small business in the United States, in Q4 of 2020, we started to see a decrease in small business optimism. And with the volatility of issues and news, this is just Ian speaking. I anticipate probably Q1 of this year, we're going to continue to see a trend toward the decrease in small business owner optimism. But I'm hoping that through great webinars like these, and thank you to the Fort Worth Business Press for putting this on, because I think it's so critical to be able to communicate with other business leaders on these issues. Hopefully we can raise awareness of how legislation and executive orders impact real small businesses, and really have a true voice to share those testimonials with decision makers in Washington.
Yeah, I just saw some statistics yesterday from the Federal Reserve from a survey they did of small business, and it certainly shows that, particularly before this legislation was passed, that there was a big need for some help out there for small business, and hopefully this legislation has helped. Ahmad, can you tell us what you're hearing from small business and some of the issues that you're hearing them talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the U.S. Small Business Administration, we are a federal agency. We are funded by your tax dollars. So all of our programs and services are offered to you at no cost. Not only are we helping with this whole Paycheck Protection Program process, but we also have our traditional programs that are in place, our loan programs, our counseling programs, and our contracting programs. So that just gives you a little bit of overview of what else we do with the U.S. Small Business Administration. But what I'm hearing and what we're hearing as an agency as it relates to businesses who are trying to navigate positively through this whole COVID issue is that they are in need, and they are in dire need. They are trying to make the decisions on if they're going to keep their doors open or if they're going to have to close their doors. And most importantly, they're trying to make the decision on how they're going to keep their employees on payroll. And that's what the whole purpose of this whole program called the Paycheck Protection Program is for, is to help those employees either bring those employees back that they've had to lay off or furlough, or if they are trying to keep them on payroll. So what we're hearing about small businesses is they want access to these funds that are available. There's $284 billion that was allocated with this new round. And we saw during the first couple of rounds of the Paycheck Protection Program that a lot of businesses were left out of that process, just didn't get a chance to take advantage of it. A lot of the larger institutions really pushed a lot of applications through fairly quickly. So we as an agency, as SBA, and also with the legislation that's in law now, we have mitigated that process to only allow small community financial institutions or those small banking institutions to have access to these funds first. And those are the institutions that have specialized missions to serve underserved markets, like our women businesses, our minority businesses, and our veteran businesses. So we wanted to make sure that they have access to these funds first before any other type of large banking institutions had the ability to submit applications. So the main thing is that we're hearing from businesses is that they really want access to these funds this go round, and we're making sure that they do that.
Yeah, that study I was telling you about with the Federal Reserve, I just posted a link to our story on it, and it certainly indicated that minority business and women-owned business uh, were harder hit, even, and all businesses were hit, but they were hit even harder than others. So that's it. That's interesting. Do you think the process is easier this go round than it was in the past? Certainly, the banks are more knowledgeable about how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we believe that, as you just said, banks are more familiar with the process now, since a lot of them did take advantage and take part of participating in the program prior to. We do now have an easier way for those businesses who don't technically have relationships developed with banking institutions or lending institutions already, to help them find lending institutions. So we have leveraged our lender match tool, which is a traditional tool that we have on our website that connects businesses with lending institutions, with banks. And they're able to go to our website at sba.gov/lender match and be matched with a banking institution or a lender that is participating in the Paycheck Protection Program, if they don't already have that relationship developed with an institution, or if they went through the process before and they're not comfortable with going with the same institution that they went with before, they're able to access that same tool and find them a new institution to do a second draw Paycheck Protection Program loan. But yes, we do believe that it is an easier process. We've made it a whole lot more streamlined for businesses, not only to get the funds, but to also get the funds forgiven. We've actually simplified the application for forgiveness for loans under $150,000 to make sure that those hardest hit, small as other small businesses with those small loans, have an easier process to get that loan completely forgiven.
And I do see a question here, and you sort of answered it, but do I make the application through a bank or the SBA?
Yeah, so same process as the first round is, you will submit an application through a lending institution. So it's best to submit it through a lending institution that you may already have a relationship with. However, that's not required. There are multiple banks out there that are accepting new customers. But yes, you do submit that application for the program, either a first draw or a second draw, to the lending institution, not to the SBA. In the same way, when it's time for you to get it forgiven, you submit that forgiveness application to your lending institution and not the SBA.
And we probably should put the link out there for that matching tool you were talking about. That's where people need to go to probably find the person in their area of expertise or in their local area to submit to, right? Okay. Um, the new law that was passed had some changes from the previous PPP loan program, particularly with regards to shuttered entertainment venues. Sean, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So just to follow on what Ahmad said, there were changes under this law for the PPP loans. Although you can't make a first draw loan under the old program, you can still, if you didn't get one last year, there are still circumstances under which you can get one this year, as well as if you gave back your loan or didn't accept all of it, there is an ability to get a supplemental loan as long as your first loan has not been forgiven. Once the forgiveness comes through, that's kind of done. And then this second draw PPP loans, I just want to hit the highlights of it real quick. It is for smaller groups. You do have to have at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts, generally on a quarter-on-quarter basis from 2019. The maximum amount is $2 million. It's, whereas it used to be 500 employees or less, now it's 300 employees or less. So there are it is for a smaller group, but it is available. The shuttered venues is an interesting grant. That's done directly by the Small Business Administration, not through lenders. Now, as of an hour ago, that portal was not yet open. So I've already had several clients calling me asking, what can I do? Do I qualify? Basically, if you're a live venue, a theater, movie theater, a promoter, something, a talent agent, museum, zoo, something in that area, you can get a grant of up to $10 million, but it's 45% of your earned revenue in 2019 is the measure. It's a relatively, it seems simple, but it's a relatively complicated number of pages to figure out, do I qualify? Because there's a lot of details. It has to be your principal business activity. So you can't be a store with a movie theater and a side room. You have to have people working on it. You have to collect money for it generally. So it's available. You just have to kind of read through the fine print to see if you qualify. But there was $15 billion reserved for it. Once the portal opens, the first 14 days, it's available for those with a 90% revenue loss. The next 14 days, it's available for those with a 70% revenue loss. And after that, it's available to everyone. And Congress has mandated that in the first 60 days, at least $20 billion be reserved for businesses with less than or equal to 50 employees. So, it's a grant. It's not a loan. It won't be income. And one of the things that this legislation did, which was clamored for by a lot of people, the legislation actually overruled the IRS and said, in addition to these forgiven loans or grants or advances not being income, the deductions for those costs paid for them cannot be denied. And that includes PPP loans, these shuttered venue operator grants, economic injury disaster loan advances, and certain other subsidies for loans that was enacted in the CARES Act.
And there was something in there, and Ian, you may want to comment on this. There's something in there also difference you mentioned. I think there's a difference between fixed seats and just tables and chairs. Is that right, as I understand it?
That's correct. You have to have a dedicated room. It can't be mobile. You have to have fixed seating. It can be outdoors, but it has to still be a defined performance space.
All right, anybody else?
Yeah, Bob and Sean did an excellent job. I just wanted to point out that we at the SBA recently released a frequently asked questions related to the shuttered venues operators grant. And I just posted that in the chat. It has pretty detailed information on what those live venues are expected to have, including those fixed seatings, as well as lighting and other type of requirements. But that frequently asked questions is a great document if someone's interested in that program to kind of start off to see if it's something that they may be able to take advantage of.
And let me jump in. That came out on the same day as I was looking into this for a client on this issue. So I forwarded that link onto them, and they were immensely grateful. One thing it does do, which was not in the statute and which is a question that I get, is what is revenue? What are receipts for these purposes? And so for the shuttered venue operators grant, that FAQ went into what is considered. And so I thought that was great elaboration that was needed.
I have a question here. I think refers back to something we touched on. When will the forgiveness start for PPP loans number one? I'm hearing from my bank, not yet.
So each banking institution or lending institution has their own way of accepting these forgiveness applications. But as a borrower, you have 10 months after the end of your covered period, which is either that 8 or 24 weeks and going forward, anywhere in between 8 and 24 weeks. So you have 10 months to apply for forgiveness with your lending institution. Once you do that, your lending institution has 60 days to review it and make a recommendation to SBA on if it should be forgiven. And then SBA has 90 days to review the recommendation and the documentation to make an ultimate decision on if it's going to be forgiven. But just be mindful, you have 10 months after the end of that covered period to apply. If you wait until after that 10 months, you have to start making payments on that loan immediately. And that's something we don't want you to have to do as an agency. We want you to get it completely forgiven. But yeah, work with your lending institution. They should have those portals up and running fairly soon on accepting those forgiveness applications. But you still have quite a bit of time. You have 10 months to apply.
And Ahmad, can I ask a question? In that process, a lot of my clients are getting these necessity questionnaires from their lenders. How does that affect the timeline? And I know that they're supposed to get those back to the lenders within 10 days, which is kind of quick. But where is that in that process that you just talked about?
Yeah, so as long as the borrower submitted the application within the 10 months, then they meet their responsible requirement. Then the banking institution has the 60 days to review it and make a ultimate decision to SBA. So as long as the borrower is within that 10 months, they do not have anything to worry about.
I have a question here. Though we talked about it a little bit, could you please further explain the shuttered venue operator grant?
Well, it is unlike the PPP loan program, it is just a series of grants that the government is going to give money to these venues. I drive by a dark movie theater to and from work every day, so I'm hoping they'll get one. But it's to for all these live performance halls, any place that's really entertainment, dedicated to entertainment that has been dark for 10 months. The goal is to get them up and running, or at least to keep employees. The shuttered venue operators grants basically can be used for the same purposes and are to be used for the same purposes as the PPP loans. So primarily employee payroll costs, but other necessary operating costs. There are a few things that you specifically cannot do with it. You cannot buy real estate with it. You cannot make investments with it. But the goal, as with all this other aid, is to keep businesses in business, even if they're kind of suspended right now, but to let them come back as quickly as possible.
Can I ask a question about nonprofits? Are there any special provision for nonprofits in the new bill?
Well, a lot of nonprofits were folded into these programs in the original CARES Act back in March, whereas the PPP loan really comes into an existing SBA loan program, but that was geared more towards small businesses. And so the CARES Act expanded that to nonprofits, Native American groups, a whole lot of other groups that were outside the original scope of those programs. So some things that were added with this new legislation, there were things like visitor centers, chambers of commerce, so a few other news broadcasting, some things that were not necessarily within the parameters of the earlier program, but by and large, most nonprofits had the opportunities back from March.
Yeah, and I just want to include that, nonprofits had the ability to apply for 501c3 organizations had the ability to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program since its existence, as well as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And they're also able to take advantage of the shuttered venues operating grants if they are in that industry. So yes, definitely encourage nonprofits, including our faith-based institutions, houses of worship, and churches, to definitely consider all three of these programs and see which ones are better suitable for them.
All right. This question sort of touches on what we're talking about too. It says, as a real estate salesperson, I don't think I was able to apply to the first PPP program. Am I able to apply under the second round? And before you all answer that, I just want to remind people it's easier for us if you use the Q&A at the bottom of the screen as opposed to the chat to ask questions. But anyway, there you go. Real estate people.
So independent contractors, sole proprietors, and self-employed individuals had the opportunity to take advantage of the Paycheck Protection Program prior to this new round, and still do. The main thing that the SBA and your lender is going to be looking at is your Schedule C. If on line 31 you show a positive number, then you're going to be eligible. However, if you don't have a positive number, you have a negative number, then you will not qualify for the Paycheck Protection Program.
And that brings up another question. How do businesses measure a 25% decrease in revenue or gross receipts? What's the method there?
So what we're going to be looking at is losses, and this is for a second draw Paycheck Protection Program loan. Just want to be mindful of that. It's not for first draws, only for second draws, where you have to demonstrate that 25% reduction in gross receipts. So we're going to be looking at your financial statements, if you have your tax returns available for that as well. So it has to be a 25% reduction in a comparable quarter of 2019 to that same quarter in 2020. So you get to select either quarter number 2, number 3, or number 4 in 2019 and show that that same quarter in 2020 had that 25% reduction. And that's one of the qualifications in order to seek a second draw Paycheck Protection Program loan.
All right.
Could I hop in for just a second?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So there's so much information floating around related to PPP, and it can be definitely overwhelming while you're also trying to keep your business in business. And one thing that I've witnessed is the U.S. Chamber really excels at procuring information. So if you go to uschamber.com, one click off the front page is what I would call PPP 2.0 for dummies. It's super simple, put together for business owners to read and understand everything about PPP pretty quickly. And it's been helpful to a lot of businesses, not just in our area, but around the country, as we've rolled out this information in a super simple format.
Yeah. Do you want to put that link in the chat over here? That would be great. Yeah, we're getting several questions, so I'm going to go through a few here. Is the PPP second draw application review process much more stringent this time around? We were flagged for having a criminal report in our ownership group, which we do not, it said. But anyway, that is a good question. Anybody?
So as it relates to criminal history, it's still the 5 years. It can't have any convictions within a 5-year period. So the process is a lot easier, I would say, because banking institutions, as we discussed before, are more familiar with the process. But before you actually jump into just applying for this program, I will encourage a borrower or business owner to either consult with their accountant if they have access to one. If they don't, then the SBA has various resource partners that are located throughout the United States. Here in the DFW area, specifically in Tarrant County, we have a small business development center that's a part of Tarrant County College. It's called the Tarrant Small Business Development Center. They have a network of business advisors that could sit down with you, walk you through this application process, help you get your documentation together, and most importantly, understand everything that's going on. We also have a Tarrant SCORE or Fort Worth SCORE chapter, and that's also a resource partner of SBA that have mentors that can also assist you throughout this whole process. In Dallas, we have a women's business center. They're capable of helping our women entrepreneurs. And at the University of Texas at Arlington, we have a veterans business outreach center. They obviously are there to cater towards our veteran entrepreneurs. And all 4 of these resources are funded directly by SBA to in turn offer you these counseling services at no cost. So my suggestion again is to, before you actually jump into applying, consult with an accountant or work with one of these business advisors at one of these resource partners.
And I'll throw in that, in last spring, a fire hose was opened to get people money, and things were loose. And, as you saw in the headlines, people got funds that should not have gotten funds. So over the year, things tightened up. That was the need for the necessity questionnaire that I'm dealing with a lot of my clients on now. And my understanding is that a number of lenders are used to the process now, having gone through it already, but they're also being asked to tighten up one of the questions is, can they just rely on what the borrower gave them? And the answer is, if the borrower is an existing customer and you know your customer, that's fine, but you need to make sure you're following all applicable banking and financial regulations in order when you're making these loans. So I think there's an ease from the original applications because people know what they're doing, but there's also perhaps a slightly heightened tension. Lenders are going to be held a little bit more responsible for the borrowers and the loans that they make.
That's a good point. And it was. I mean, I think as we saw several companies, some fairly large public companies got some money as well. And I saw, I think actually Ian pointed this out to me that some of the touring companies for some of the big bands got some money. Now the bands may have a lot of money, but those touring companies are independent and they received some. Have several venue questions actually, which is good. Regarding the shutter grant, if the venue is classified as a bar, however, does have performance area for live performances, would they qualify? We like to support our bars here at the Business Press. We are journalists after all, so that's a good question.
Well, I think one of the requirements is it has to be the principal business activity. So I have not looked specifically at bar owners in that context, but I would think that would be a high hurdle to reach. A performance venue like Bass Hall that has a bar would easily qualify. A bar that happens to have a stage, probably not, because it does have to have a dedicated room. I don't know if a space in the corner with a raised stage would be sufficient. And there are a lot of other parameters and requirements for getting those grants. So it's really on an individualized basis, reading through that and figuring out whether you qualify or not.
And in a similar way, is it only for the venue or is it for performing organizations that perhaps rent space for their performances to be held within the venue?
I'm not sure about that. I know that it is owners, it is promoters, and that includes nonprofits. They can also get nonprofits that operate the qualifying venues can also get these grants. I do not know offhand whether just leasing space in a venue is adequate.
And yet another venue question. This is interesting. Is a wedding venue eligible for shuttered venue grant? There are no fixed seats. Anybody run into that?
Yeah, I would suggest that person look at the FAQ that I posted, but it's possible that a wedding venue would not typically qualify for the SVOG grant. But they definitely need to look at those frequently asked questions. It's very specific with the requirements of a facility, such as the fixed seating in certain lighting situations that replicate entertainment and performances. But it seems that a wedding venue, which is just being rented out for a particular cause or occasion, like a wedding, may not be the best ideal for this type of grant. But the alternative is the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. Definitely consider that as an alternative. You're not able to apply for both at the same time, but they work hand in hand. Just as Sean stated, the proceeds are to be considered the same as it relates for paycheck protection in the SVOG grant. So those entities that do qualify for the Shut Up Venues Operators Grant should also review the Paycheck Protection Program and see which one of the programs that they may get the best or most maximize the funding out of both of those programs and see which one is better suitable for them.
So like you said earlier, talk to some of those people like at SCORE or someone like that might have some experience there, might help you navigate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also going to post in the chat. We have a dedicated email address that's for questions related to the Shuttered Venues Operators Grant, where you can email that email in the box and someone will email you back directly related to your answer.
Oh, great. I have a
And let me
question.
add,
Go ahead.
if I can, let me add, because of a change from the law, you used to not be able to get both a PPP loan and then take an employee retention credit on your taxes. But that changed in December. So you cannot get loan forgiveness for the same payroll that you're getting a tax credit for. But if you have enough expenses, you can, even if you got a PPP loan, there is some ability to get this employee retention credit on your tax returns. And for those who have looked into that already, the legislation in December loosened up the credit requirements. The IRS has not updated their FAQ website on this yet for the December legislation, but the qualified wages went from 50% to 70%. The decline in receipts was, instead of 50%, you only had to have a 20% decline in receipts. It went up to 500 employees from 100 employees. So that's a pretty significant benefit that the new legislation made, particularly as we're in tax season right now.
Oh, that's good.
Can I piggyback on what Sean just said?
Sure.
This round of PPP, although it is more targeted and intentional, businesses that qualify, they really have expanded how you can use those funds. And I've seen there's been a lot of questions related to shuttered event venues, but to those folks and business owners whose businesses have been affected, I do encourage them to explore the new PPP legislation, because if you're a qualifying business, they've expanded what you can use as far as expenses and supplier costs, and there's a lot more breathing room inside that. And in effect, a forgiven loan is basically a grant.
And also, to follow up on that, you still have to have at least 60% of the PPP loan applied to payroll. But if you have other costs, then the statute did add to things that you can spend it for. Personal protection equipment, filtration equipment, drive-in windows for your business, and things that you need to social distance. That was certainly expanded in the act.
Yes, and I concur. We did allow for other type of expenses to be considered forgivable expenses. And Sean mentioned that there is a requirement to have at least 60% in order to get forgiven for payroll. You could use all 100% of that for payroll if you desire, but there's also an ability to use not more than 40% for those operating costs. Those operating costs include things like your rent for your business, your utilities, interest on mortgage, and then back to utilities. Utilities are considered like electric bill, telephone, internet access, transportation costs. But along with that, personal protective equipment, the PPE, and any fortifying of your business, for putting up shielding. Also, if your business was damaged during the 2020 riots, that is also a forgivable expense as well, as relates to the new round of Paycheck Protection.
All right. Got several questions here. Are certain businesses that receive PPP loans during the first round of funding eligible for the second round? I think we've sort of answered that, but if anyone wants to tackle that.
Yes, you can apply. You can apply it for PPP 2.0 if you receive the first round of PPP. Yes, you can also apply if you did not receive it.
Here's another one. As a woman-owned special event business, which has been shut down due to the limitation on gatherings, will I be eligible for the second round? I received a small amount in the first time, but not enough to keep a staff or a storefront?
Yeah, it's possible. So for a second draw Paycheck Protection Program loan, the eligibility requirements is you have completely used all of your first draw loan. The second is you must not have any more than 300 employees. And the third thing is you must demonstrate that 25% reduction in gross receipts from a comparable quarter in 2019 to that same quarter in 2020. The way you get your loan amount, your maximum loan amount, is 2.5 times average monthly payroll cost in either 2019 or 2020, up to $2 million. And if you're in the restaurant industry or food or accommodation industry, it's 3.5 times average monthly payroll costs in either 2019 or 2020, up to $2 million. So it's very possible. Definitely work with a lending institution or work with one of those business advisors that I talked about to see what's the best way for you to maximize your second draw.
Ahmad, you might have answer this question. Did you find in the first round that small businesses that had a relationship with their lender already did better in getting the grants than someone who had to start fresh with a new lender?
Yeah, we did see that. We did see that businesses that had those relationships developed did have an opportunity to access the program a lot easier than those that didn't. But we are, like I said before, we have made it easier for those businesses that don't have those relationships. Just because you have a banking app on your phone doesn't necessarily mean that you have a relationship with the banking institution. So we are trying to make it easier for you to develop that relationship. In working with some of these community financial institutions, these small lenders like microloan intermediaries here in the DFW area, we have 3, Lift Fund, People Fund, and BCL of Texas. You're able to get that interpersonal relationship with those lenders. And we definitely encourage those business owners that don't have that relationship developed to work with an institution like those so you could get that interpersonal relationship with your lender.
And I think I saw. Go ahead, Ian. Go ahead.
Well, as a business owner that navigated PPP myself and was helping lots of other business owners navigate that, to double down on what Ahmad said, yes, the relationship with the bank is I would say key. And what I learned from my SCORE counselor many years ago, the 4 cornerstones of a small business, the 4 key relationships you need to nurture are banker, insurance, attorney, and accountant. So any small business owners that don't have those 4 relationships already in place, those are key relationships that will serve you well in business. But that bank relationship, if you haven't started it already, this is a great time to start it. And I've even seen banks that are competing for new customers through PPP, that if you will move your accounts to their bank, they'll help you navigate the PPP process as well.
Yeah, and I saw some hiring among the banks when the first round hit because they needed those experts there. So if you go to a bank and basically they don't have anyone to help you or you're not satisfied with them, try somebody else that maybe you tried before, because they may have hired someone with that expertise now, and they may be looking for something that even if they had shut the door in your face before. Let's see. I've still got several questions. Give us the site for the shuttered venue operator grant. I don't know if we did that already. Can we also qualify for this grant together with the second PPP loan? I think Sean answered that earlier, but go ahead.
No, you can, if the first PPP loan will not disqualify you, but you could, at this point, you can either get the second PPP loan if you qualify, or you can get the grant. You cannot get both in 2021.
And question here, missing a little bit of it, but I think it's is loan forgiveness is until August 2021. Is that correct?
So again, to get your loan forgiven, you must apply within 10 months of the end of your covered period. So if you got a Paycheck Protection Program loan prior to August the 9th of 2020, you had either 8 weeks or 24 weeks as your covered period. So at the end of that period, you must apply within 10 months to your lender to get it forgiven. Going forward, if you are applying for forgiveness for this new round of funding, you can choose anywhere in between 8 and 24 weeks. So at the end of that period, again, you will have 10 months to apply for forgiveness.
Okay. And let's see, where can we find details on the employee retention credit now that it has been revised? I don't know if that
Well,
was Sean or Ahmad.
The IRS has on their website, every government agency has a link to COVID related programs. So the IRS has a page on their website regarding the employer retention credit. And it also has a series of FAQs on about 12.5 topics, one of which is the employee retention credit. So we can find and send a link to that. But as I noted, they have not updated many of those FAQs for the December legislation. So we're still waiting for them to do that.
All right, here's another question. I am self-employed. My business is a DBA. I do not have permanent employees and do not write payroll checks. I hire other talent on contract as needed. My income is determined by gross receivables less expensive. Do self-employed people that do not write payroll checks qualify for a PPP forgiving loan?
So self-employed individuals, independent
Yes.
contractors, sole proprietors have the ability to apply for this program. If you are paying yourself a paycheck, you have the ability to apply for this program. Again, we're going to look at Schedule C. Your Schedule C in line 31, if that is a positive number, you qualify. If it's a negative number, then you wouldn't qualify for the Paycheck Protection Program. So work with a lending institution to navigate through that process. Or again, if you have access to an accountant, if you don't, work with one of those business advisors at either the Tarrant Small Business Development Center or Fort Worth SCORE chapter.
I think I heard a collective sigh from a bunch of Uber drivers out there. Yeah. Do average payroll cost include employee portion of taxes, Social Security, medical, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad someone brought it up. So payroll includes compensation for employees, and compensation includes things such as insurance, state and local taxes, and salaries up to 100,000. So definitely that is included.
With regard to the 3.5% in the food industry, does a business whose whole source of revenue is the placement of managers and chefs for restaurants qualify to use the 3.5? So it looks like a food related industry, I think is basically what he's asking.
Yeah, so it is what we determine. SBA has something called industry codes or NEX codes. So if you're in NEX code NAICS code 72, which is accommodation and food services sector, then that is the industry that is able to calculate the 3.5 times average monthly payroll costs in either 2019 or 2020. And it's typically the restaurant industry, but it can include other type of businesses. As long as you're in that accommodation and food services sector, NEX code 72, you will be able to calculate that 3.5 times.
Yeah, here's one related to nonprofits. In the case of religious institution or charitable organization that depends upon dues or fundraising, are these types of receipts considered the revenue that must have been reduced at least 25% to qualify under PPP number 2?
Yes. So any gross receipts included in things like fundraising, donations, things like that can be considered gross receipts. What we're still trying to figure out is how grant opportunities are going to play into that role. So that question is still kind of lingering out there.
And here's one I've heard this several times before we talked about doing this. Had the forgiveness forms been finalized yet? As my bank said no, and that I should wait until the form is completed and posted on the internet?
All of our forgiveness forms are complete. We were waiting on the last forgiveness form, which is that simplified forgiveness for loans under 150,000, which is going to be the form 3508S. And that is the form for, which is the easiest form, which is for those loans under 150,000. And all forms are complete and ready to be distributed to the potential borrowers. It just depends on what banking institution you're utilizing to see if they actually are accepting those or if they have their portal up and running. But yeah, on SBA's standpoint, all those forms are ready to go.
And it's true that the forms have changed a couple times over the fall as new issues were identified, new questions came in. I will say one of the biggest questions I get is, should I file now or should I wait? Because on the one hand, if I file now under the rules as they are, the sooner I file, the sooner I'll get my forgiveness. On the other hand, the rules keep changing or seem to keep changing every month or so, and new legislation came along. The stuff in December, the legislation in December made some significant changes retroactively. So if you did not file for forgiveness, there may be benefit for you. So that's an individual call, but that is certainly something on everybody's mind, when to pull the trigger on the forgiveness.
Okay, great. And I think you answered this one before. The question was, can I use PPP2 funding to pay rent, utilities, and other expenses? But I think you explained they expanded that, what that can be used for, right, Ahmad?
Yes, sir. And that is absolutely right. Those businesses are able to use things such as rent, interest on mortgage, utilities as forgivable expenses, including the new things that include personal protective equipment, PPE, shielding to put up in your business, and if your business was damaged by the 2020 riots.
Still waiting for probably some more questions to come in here. I wondered if anybody has any anecdotes about what they've seen, anything innovative that you've seen some businesses do out there to get through this. Ian, do you have any examples?
Yes, we have, and I think I'll start with what we've done here, which is just gone to great lengths to protect our employees, our customers, people making deliveries here, and I'm really thankful that the new PPP includes covering PPE expenses. As a business owner, that's something business owners certainly didn't budget for, and on average spending somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 extra a month on PPE expenses. That's pretty significant for businesses our size, anyway. And restaurants, I've got a friend, a restaurant owner that has had to go through several expensive cleaning processes after having cases in their restaurant amongst their staff. So the PPP is a much needed relief. Our favorite Japanese steakhouse down the street, they were really having trouble navigating how to apply for PPP, and we sent some folks over to help them find their way to the PPP funds. So all in all, I would say, things like what the business press is doing, helping folks. There's been obviously a plethora of questions that have come up in the chat, and folks need information. And I'm glad that you guys put this together so that folks could get access to information from people who have it.
Yeah, I'll give an anecdote too. When this first happened, the shutdown first happened, I didn't have my computer set up at home, so I was still working out of the office. I was the only one, basically in the office. And at one point we published a story about uh, making applications for PPP loans through the city of Fort Worth. And I had this couple come into the office thinking that we were the people doing the loans and they wanted the loans. Well, these people also couldn't speak English, so it was a matter of writing on tablets and passing them to each other. But we were able to get them to someone who could speak their language, and that's probably an issue. And I wonder, Ahmad, if you might sort of walk people through how could they, if they aren't very good English speakers or don't speak English at all, are there people out there to help those businesses?
Absolutely, absolutely. Our Tarrant Small Business Development Center, right there at Tarrant College, has a wealth of business advisors that are capable of communicating in various languages. I would suggest that you work with them. If they don't have anybody on hand to speak a specific language at that center, then they have a network of other centers across the country that they could tap into and get those particular individuals on a Zoom or a phone call to make sure that they're getting their questions answered. Same thing with SCORE. SCORE has a network of mentors all across the country that they could tap into that speak multiple languages. So definitely encourage you to utilize those resource partners, regardless of whatever language that individual speaks.
Ahmad, I'm glad you brought that resource to everyone's attention, because there's probably other people on this Zoom who know a business owner that doesn't speak much or any English. And as a matter of outreach, you've given us a resource to help those folks. Thank you.
I have an interesting question here. I'll try to boil it down. Basically, I guess they're, well, maybe Ahmad can probably explain this process, but the bank's basically saying that the Small Business Administration has to approve the documents. Says we have not received communication back confirming our loan approval. So the question is it true banks are not reviewing the applications? And two, are you seeing that the loan approvals are taking longer?
I haven't heard of that. I was reading that question in the Q&A as well. My suggestion is to reach out to our district office and let one of our lender relations specialists try to see if they could find out any information for you about this particular loan. The number is 817-684-5500. I will post it in the chat as well, and speak to one of our lender relations specialists who could probably provide you some answers on what may be happening with your particular application. But I have not heard of that instance.
I've got to think that that you guys have been overwhelmed as well there at the Small Business Administration with this whole process as well.
Yeah, we actually are fielding a lot of calls, especially with the economic injury disaster loan. So the processing center just so happens to be in Fort Worth, which is actually also a separate entity from the part of SBA that I work in. So people see that, and our numbers was listed when you Google SBA Fort Worth. So we're fielding calls all across the country as it relates to economic injury and paycheck protection. So, but we're all here. We're completely staffed. We're all working, and we're able to assist as much as possible.
Well, I think that's about it for our. We got, looks like most of our questions answered, and said we recorded this so people can listen back, and we'll have the chat and all the links. I really want to thank our panelists. Y'all have been terrific and answered a lot of questions in a short period of time. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, and we'll probably have to do this again probably. So thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Rich.
I'm having trouble with my mute. I think I just unmuted myself. Ahmad, Sean, Ian, thank you so much for being on this webinar with us. I want to especially thank Kelly Hart Hallman, now called Kelly Hart, the law firm, our sponsor for this event. I will say that from a personal and from our business standpoint, I've had 3 conversations in the last 24 hours, 2 of them with people in our business, in the media business, and 1 in another one. And all of them have said, without this second round of the stimulus and the PPPs, they wouldn't last probably another 60 days. So these programs are vitally important, and they can be intricate. I'm glad everybody got to ask. I think we answered all the questions that were asked. But to the SBA, Ahmad, ultimately, we have gotten a PPP, and the bank approved it and then waited for the SBA to approve it, and they did quickly. We didn't get any special treatment, by the way, from Ahmad being on this webinar. But this program is vital. My own view, and because we're in the media business and we offer our views, is that it's just not small businesses, it's not restaurants and entertainment venues. Businesses in this country, the majority of them have been very hard hit by this pandemic. And it's going to take, I think, a relatively long time to fully come out of it. So the program's important, understanding it's important. The insights that all 3 of you provided are vital, and I know that I appreciate it as a business owner, as I'm certain all the other people on the webinar appreciate it as well. I want to say, we're running a little bit over, remind you what Bob pointed out. This has been recorded, and you can go to our website, fortworthbusiness.com. And again, you can subscribe, but you can watch this video over again and perhaps pick up maybe some nuances that you might have missed. I would also say that, and Ian touched on this, for our own business, we've had to reinvent. We've had to become more creative. We've had to become very comfortable working at home. My big concern right now was that my dog wouldn't bark, which she didn't, but we're all having to learn different things and be more creative to get through this. So with the help of these loans and good employees and creativity and taking a fresh look at our business, obviously most of us will get through it. So it's just really important, I think, that you step back and ask what your basic mission is and what you're trying to achieve. And quite frankly, for us, it's been, how do we find new ways to achieve it? For us, it's been to concentrate very heavily on digital. So we have a number of new digital products that we have to try to keep people informed. Keep the faith. Thank you, everybody, again. Thank you, Kelly Hart. And we'll be doing webinars at least 2 a month on a variety of subjects. I think a good one might be get 3 or 4 businesses on and say, how did you react? How did you reinvent? How have you stayed in business? But look at our website, stay up with our newsletters, and we'll keep you informed. We hope we have you back for our next webinar. As I said, we'll be doing at least 2 a month through the year. Thanks again. Have a great day. Bye.